Hi all, myself Nimish Bhatia. Welcome to my channel, Train the Trainer by Nimish Bhatia. This channel is meant for teachers, trainers and coaches in order to increase the overall efficiency of their sessions. So let's keep connected, subscribe to this channel and let's get started. So let's first have a look what the session is all about. So the first thing that we are going to discuss is that how does the brain function in the learning process. Second, what are the psychological basis for learning? And the third, how andragogy differs from pedagogy. So these are three key things that we are going to discuss in this first video, and let's get started. When you're learning, important changes take place in your brain, including the creation of new connections between your neurons. This phenomena is called neuroplasticity. The more you practice, the stronger these connections become. It's as simple as that. Now let's have a look at what are the different phases of building connections between your neurons. The first stage is motivation. Now this is a stage where you don't know how to do a particular thing, you're not sure, but you want to give it a try. A good example of that would be a person joining a gym, paying annual fees, but not going for more than 2 or 3 days. It has happened to me a few times, that's the reason, that's the first example that came to my mind. So in that case, we can say that I went to the motivation stage and that's where it ended. But the next stage of motivation is practice. Now, practice is a stage where you start doing that particular thing, you start practicing, you start making mistakes. So that is the practice stage. After that comes advanced practice stage. Now, advanced practice stage is a stage where your comfort level has increased, your confidence has increased because of the amount of practice that you have done. After that comes the skillfulness stage. Now, this is a stage where you started doing things in your own way. Somebody asked you that you should do a particular exercise, but you have found alternatives to that as well. So that is the skillfulness stage. Somebody asked you to solve a particular sum or a question in a particular fashion, but you have found another way to do it. So that is a stage of skillfulness. After that, the stage comes where you become an expert. Now, expert is when you have started training people. People have started coming up to you and asking you questions. So that is a stage where you have become the expert. So these are the 5 phases of building connections between your neurons. Gestalt psychology was found by German thinkers Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Kofta, and focused on how people interpret the world. Now we are going to look at the Gestalt psychology in detail on the next slide onwards. Gestalt psychology suggests that we all search for patterns, organizations, and meanings. So basically, we try to make out a meaning out of everything. Also, the perception is organized into various forms. So the first one is transposition. Now, in transposition, we look for patterns or figures which might be distorted, but we can still recognize them. For example, if you are taught a 4 centimeter circle is bigger than a 3 centimeter circle, but in test you get a question, is 5 centimeter bigger or is 4 centimeter bigger? All of a sudden your answer is 5 centimeter. Why? Because you chose the transpositioning of the rule of larger than. So it is because of that you were able to give the right answer. That's called transposition. Now the ground is as important as the figure for understanding. Elements are perceived as either figures or as a background. It is not possible to look at both simultaneously and make the sense out of it. One of the examples are shown on this slide. Now, as a training designer, you will always illustrate the background of its concept and then move to the forefront of the discussion in order to ensure the conversation sounds more relevant. Since we are training adults, if we are talking about coaching, or we are talking about training a sales team, so they have to buy what you're trying to say. If they don't buy what you're trying to say, if they don't buy the background that you are trying to say, if they don't buy the relevance that you are trying to say, they will not buy your session. They will not get convinced of them being there and the session being fruitful. So that is very, very, very important for every trainer, for every teacher. Things that are perceived as similar are always grouped together in our mind. So if we use what particularly already we know, then the message is more easily downloaded. For example, children are first taught about rectangle and triangle, and then taught figures like parallelogram. So that's easy for them to understand it and to draw it. Learning is always based on memory, and more learning objectives are grouped similarly, the learning process gets better. In proximity, what we try to say is that when the things are not grouped in a logical way, they cause confusion. So for example, if we see in this slide, the first 3 rows seem to be one group and the 4th row seems to be a different group. Why? Because it's been kept at a distance. Now the message that we draw out of this is that one of the important rules when we are making a presentation or when we are making a courseware is that everything related to a particular topic should be in one slide. If it is in multiple slides, people perceive it to be different informations on different slides. So that is again one of the very important bits that we should keep in our mind when we are designing a training module or when we are designing a courseware for our participants or for our students. Law of closure refers to a tendency of the brain to ignore the gaps and fill it by seeing it as a complete image. Now, the information given should not have any gaps, else it leads to perceptual filling of gaps and can completely change the meaning. Just like the image that we see on the slide, wherein probably you didn't want to talk about the football and wanted to discuss objects in pentagon shape and at different locations, but people perceive it as a football. Another example of that could be that, let's say you are running a sales training workshop and you are explaining sales to be a mutual exchange of benefits, but you're not explaining them what is a product, what is a feature, what is an advantage, and what is a benefit. If you're not explaining someone a difference between product, feature, advantage, and benefits, and you're explaining sales to be mutual exchange of benefits, you're just confusing people. So you have to close the loops. You have to make sure there are no gaps left when a download is being given. Knowles' theory of andragogy is an attempt to develop a theory specifically for adult learning. Knowles emphasizes that adults are self-directed and expect to take responsibility of decisions. Adult learning programs must accommodate this fundamental aspect. In practical terms, andragogy means that instructions for adults need to focus more on the process and less on the content being taught. Strategies such as case studies, role plays, simulations, and self-evaluations are most useful. Instructors adopt a role of facilitator or resource rather than a lecturer or a grader or a teacher. There are certain things which andragogy talks about which are very, very important. The first one out of them is that there is a need to explain why specifically things are being taught. So a logical reasoning is something which is a very important part of andragogy. Second is instructions should be task oriented instead of memorization. Third is instructions should take into account the wide range of different backgrounds of learners. Learning materials and activities should allow different levels and different people with different experiences to equally participate in the session. The fourth is, since adults are self-directed, instructions should allow learner to discover things for themselves, provide guidance, and help them with mistakes that are done, and appreciate the mistakes, because end of the day, if a person is making mistakes, we all understand that he's getting on to a practice mode. If he is demotivated at that time, he'll be like me, paying annual fee but not going to the gym for more than 2-3 days. There are few key principles that should be kept in mind for andragogy. The first one is adults need to be involved in the planning and evaluation of the instructions, because if they are involved, there are better chances for them to buy what you're trying to say, to get convinced. Second is experiential learning. Now, experience provides the basics for learning activities. That's the second principle of andragogy. Third is adults are more interested in learning subjects that have immediate relevance to their job or personal life. The fourth, adult learning is problem centered rather than content centered. So it should be resolving some or the other issue that they are facing. Only then they'll be interested in attending the session, else you will lose the audience interest in your session. Now let's understand what is the difference between pedagogy and andragogy. So pedagogy, as a Greek word, is derived from pedo and agogos, means leading children, and andragogy is a Greek word which is derived from andra and agogos, meaning leading a man. So now what we understand till now is that pedagogy is about training children and andragogy is about training adults. Hope it's clear. Then when we talk about pedagogy, it is more about methods and approaches, and andragogy is all about procedure and techniques, which means you have to be absolutely pro to train someone on a particular technique, especially when that person has been doing that job for a very long time. Then in pedagogy, it is the teacher's competency that plays a vital role, though in andragogy it's more of self-directed. In pedagogy, the participant has very little experience. In andragogy, the participant has a lot of experience. In fact, in a lot of sessions we have seen that the experience of the participant is more than the age of the facilitator. So you can imagine, that's the beauty of this job. Then in pedagogy, you're told what to do, what not to do. In andragogy, you are not told what to do, what not to do. It is an open forum, people share their experiences, people find different way outs to do a particular thing, because it's more of problem centered. Then in pedagogy, there is a grading system. You have to score this particular percentage, this particular mark. But in andragogy, it's more of relaxed, it's comparatively relaxed. Then in pedagogy, it is the individual performance that makes a difference. In andragogy, it is more of team performance, it's more of teamwork that is required. Then in pedagogy, the instructor evaluates the learning, and in andragogy, instructor only assesses the gaps and fills the gap. So these are the differences between pedagogy and andragogy. Hope it's clear to you guys. And there would be a lot of learning in many similar videos coming up. Take care.